Mr. Vice President, nice to see you, sir.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
I haven't spoken to you since the convention back in July of 2024.
A crazy week. I remember it well.
Very unusual week, indeed it was. Lots going on. Big week for the administration.
Sure.
President Trump sealing the deal with Israel and Gaza. No other president was able to do that. And it's been going on since 1948. So what is it? Is it his policy or his personality? Or why was he able to do that?
I think it's both, and I also think it's his frankly unorthodox way of doing diplomacy. I mean, so much has failed, and the president said, we're not going to do the same stuff that's been tried for 50, 60, 70 years that's failed. We're going to try something different. And it's a lot, Greta. I mean, it's hard to really encapsulate what made this moment possible. I think part of it, of course, is that the Israelis sort of reached a point where they felt like there was an opportunity. But I think most importantly is the president earned the trust of both our Israeli friends, but also a lot of our friends in the Gulf Arab states. And they were able to apply pressure to Hamas. Meanwhile, he was willing to actually work with the Israelis and figure out what were their go zones, what were their no-go zones. And importantly, we had two diplomats, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, who are not traditional State Department apparatchiks, right? These are not career bureaucrats from Washington, D.C. These are private sector people who know how to strike a deal, and he really empowered them in the final minutes, the final hours to get it done. I remember, Greta, the president was actually doing a Law and Order roundtable when I got a call from Jared and said, hey, we have a question. We need to get it to the president. And of course, the president was in this roundtable. And this was the famous moment where Marco sort of whispers something in the president's ear and has, you know, the note card effectively saying we're right on the 1 yard line of getting this deal done. And just being involved in that, you realize that it's the president's constant, almost obsessive focus on getting the deal done. Identify the issues, work through the issues, and get the deal done. And that's why we are where we are. And of course, now we're going to have to work to make sure that the deal sticks.
What do you think about the fact that, I mean, I look at the polls in Israel, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, I've interviewed more than a dozen times over my career, is that he is not high in his polls among the Israelis. He won the war, and it's almost Churchill-like in that Churchill won World War II, and then afterwards he got, basically, people didn't want him.
Sure. You know, I don't know Israel well enough to know what, you know, the prime minister's poll numbers are, what they are. I think part of it is he's been around for 30 years, right? And eventually Democratic publics just, they get to a point where maybe they want something new, maybe they want something fresh, but that's purely a guess. I have no idea. I think that clearly we are at this moment because the president of the United States worked very hard to make it happen, and we worked with our Israeli friends to make it happen too. And both Prime Minister Netanyahu, his entire cabinet, but also, frankly, a lot of the Gulf Arab states were really a critical piece in making this happen. Of course, Qatar helped, the Turks helped, the Egyptians helped, and even some nations that are not in the Arabian world but are Muslim majority nations like Indonesia, they were a big part of this too. So it took all shapes and sizes. I'm sure that every single one of those countries, their leaders have their own domestic problems, their own domestic, you know, upsides and benefits. But the President of the United States was willing to work with anybody, and that's why the deal got done.
Can you import to the export to the Russia-Ukraine war the strategy that ended this war? Or are those just two completely different wars? Because I see them a lot similar. Hamas invaded, basically, Israel,
sure,
killing 1,300. And Russia invaded Ukraine either 2014 or 2022, depending on when you say the war started.
You know, I think that the thing that actually works in both cases is the Trump approach to diplomacy, which is energetic, that empowers his people on the ground, that actually encourages them to get a deal done and is willing to explore some unconventional means in order to get the deal done. And look, we've made progress in the Russia-Ukraine war, Greta, that we wouldn't have made absent President Trump's leadership. But it turned out, as the president said, I think it surprised all of us, including the president, that this is a particularly tough nut to crack. And as much as energetic diplomacy from the President of the United States can get people to the 1 yard line, eventually you have to have the two parties who are willing to cut a deal. And right now, for all of our work, and we're going to keep on working at it, the Russians and the Ukrainians are just not at the point where they can make a deal. I do think that we will eventually get there, but it's going to take a lot more work because I think as we learned, the parties started so far apart. I think there's a fundamental misalignment of expectations. I'd say this in the Russia-Ukraine war, where the Russians tend to think that they're doing better on the battlefield than they actually are. And I think that's made it harder to strike a deal in these last couple of months, even though, again, we've made progress. I do think we're going to get to a deal, but we just got a little bit further to go.
People think news just happens. It doesn't. It happens because there's someone there to capture the moment, to explain it and share it. That's my job. I go where news breaks and give you the facts. Join me for The Record on Newsmax.